Imagine this: majestic cathedrals, the rustle of fine fabrics, the gleam of jewels, and the crackle of radio waves. Today, this sounds like something from an alternate history, but this is how a new era began for the British royal family, and not just for them. The year was 1922. Europe was just beginning to recover from World War I. The world was changing at an incredible pace, and technology played no small part in this transformation. Ideas of democratization, the expansion of rights and freedoms, were already in the air, and even age-old monarchical traditions could not remain untouched. At the center of these changes was Princess Mary, the only daughter of King George V and Queen Mary. Young and beautiful, she was preparing for one of the most important events of her life, her wedding to Viscount Lascelles. By all accounts, it was a classic royal marriage, a union of noble families, strengthening ties, and a great responsibility to the nation. But this wedding, which took place on February 28, 1922, went down in history not only as a celebration of love and tradition. It became one of the first royal events to reach the ears of the general public. For the first time, voices from Buckingham Palace, the sounds of the ceremony at Westminster Abbey, the echo of solemn vows, all of this was broadcast on the radio. Radio. It's hard to imagine today just how revolutionary this invention was at the time. It was as if it teleported people from their living rooms, from the far corners of the country, right into the heart of the royal event. Previously, such ceremonies were accessible only to the chosen few, the aristocracy, courtiers, the lucky few who found themselves near the passing carriage. But now anyone with a radio receiver could be a witness to history. This was a powerful breakthrough that reduced the distance between the monarchy and the people, making the crowned heads not just symbols, but almost real people whose voices reached directly into the home. And this was just the first step, a step that opened the door to new formats of interaction, to new ways for the royal family to be present in the lives of their subjects. How did this affect the perception of the monarchy? How did the tradition of royal representation itself change? This step was monumental. It broke down the invisible walls that separated Buckingham Palace from everyday life. Before this, the monarchy was perceived as something distant, almost mythical. The king and queen appeared before their subjects only at ceremonial events. Their portraits hung on walls, but their voices, their emotions remained hidden. Radio changed that. Suddenly, members of the royal family transformed from static symbols into living people, albeit with a very special status. The wedding ceremony, with its solemnity and intimacy, suddenly became a shared treasure. People could hear Princess Mary recite her vows, hear the greetings, hear the gun salute announcing the completed marriage. This was not just listening. It was participation, albeit from a distance. The effect was astonishing. Interest in the royal family surged. People who had previously only read about the events in the lives of monarchs in newspapers now felt a part of it. Radio receivers, which had previously been used mainly for listening to news and music, took on a new, almost sacred meaning. They became a bridge to a world that had previously seemed unattainable. For the royal family itself, this was both a challenge and an opportunity. A challenge because now every public step, every word could be heard and judged by millions. An opportunity because radio provided an unprecedented tool for strengthening the connection with the people, for demonstrating unity and stability in turbulent times. The wedding of Princess Mary and Viscount Lascelles became a kind of experiment. The broadcast was a success, causing a huge resonance. It showed that the new technology radio could become a powerful tool for the monarchy, a tool that would allow it to remain relevant, understandable, and close to its subjects in a changing world. This was a turning point. It marked the beginning of a deliberate policy of openness. Next would come the King's radio addresses, broadcasts of Christmas messages, and then the move to television. Each of these technological innovations would reduce the distance between Buckingham Palace and the general public, making the monarchy more visible, more human. But the first step was taken right then, in February 1922, when voices from Westminster Abbey, for the first time in history, traveled the distance and reached the ears of millions of Britons. It was the sound of a new century, the sound of a changing monarchy. And this sound would echo in the air for a long time to come. This echo was not just metaphorical. After the successful broadcast of Princess Mary's wedding, the potential of radio for the royal family became obvious. The skepticism of the early years gave way to understanding. Ignoring this new reality would be short-sighted. And if at first it was more of a one-time, albeit important, event, soon the use of radio began to take on a systematic character. Of course, one should not imagine that the palace doors immediately swung open and the monarchs began to behave like stage stars. Far from it. Palace etiquette, age-old traditions, and the restraint inherent in royal persons did not disappear. However, there was a willingness to use available technologies to communicate with subjects. The next logical step, and perhaps even more significant in terms of demonstrating humanity, was the King's Christmas messages. The first such radio address by George V was broadcast in 1932. By this time, radio had already firmly entered many British homes. And so, on the most family-oriented holiday, the voice of the monarch, the symbol of the nation, sounded from the receivers, wishing everyone a Merry Christmas. It was incredibly powerful. The king, who had previously seemed like a figure from history books, suddenly addressed each Briton personally. This tradition, started by George V, is still alive today, being one of the most recognizable symbols of the British monarchy and its connection with the people. Each such broadcast, whether it was a wedding or a Christmas message, worked to strengthen the position of the monarchy. In an era when old foundations were being questioned and the world was changing rapidly, the ability to adapt and use new communication channels was vital. The monarchy demonstrated that it was not a stagnant relic of the past, but a living institution capable of communicating with the people in a language they understood, using relevant technologies. It is important to understand that these steps were not accidental. Behind each broadcast was a decision, often after long deliberation and discussion. There were also opponents of such openness among the more conservatively minded members of the court, who feared that this would dilute the sacrality of the monarchy. But sober calculation prevailed. In the face of growing public interest in the life of the royal family, it was better to control the presentation of information themselves than to leave it to the mercy of newspapers or rumors. Thus, the wedding of Princess Mary, seemingly a private event, became a catalyst for the wider use of media. This was not just a historical fact, but a strategic step that anticipated many future changes in the relationship between the monarchy and the public. It was the beginning of a path along which the monarchy, step by step, emerged from the shadow of the palace walls to meet millions of subjects. A path that would eventually lead it to television screens and then into the digital space to social networks. In essence, each new generation of media radio, television, the internet posed the same question to the monarchy: how to maintain its relevance and connection with the people in the face of a changing information landscape. The answer lay in the willingness to use these technologies, adapting traditions and protocols to them. And the first convincing yes to this question was given in 1922, with the broadcast of Princess Mary's wedding. Thus, the history of broadcasting and the history of the adaptation of the British monarchy to new realities became closely intertwined. The wedding of Princess Mary was that very grain of sand that triggered an avalanche of changes. This event showed that technologies could not only convey information, but also build bridges. Bridges between the crown and the people, between tradition and modernity, between the sacred and the secular. Today, when we see members of the royal family in social networks, when their lives are constantly covered in the media, it may seem that their openness is taken for granted. But behind this visibility lies almost a century of adaptation experience, which began with a half-embarrassed permission to install microphones in Westminster Abbey on that cold February day in 1922. The story of Princess Mary's wedding is not just a tale of one of many royal marriages. It is a story of how the world changed and how an institution that seemed eternal found new ways to dialogue with its audience. It is a story of the courage to accept the new, of the foresight to see potential where others saw only noise and interference. And ultimately, it is a story of survival. The survival of tradition in a rapidly changing world, thanks to the ability not only to preserve the past, but also to boldly look to the future using its tools.